came into a curriculum which was perfectly laid down with the exception of one elective course. We took a writing course and everybody took the writing course and we wrote 3 papers a week. We took a physics course and everybody took the physics course and darn near everybody just really struggled with it. We all had a math course, we all had a history course. And then there was something else that we could tack on. I remember I took French. Now that sounds, by our standards today, horrifying. It wasn't. It was a very good curriculum, having been hammered out for the last couple of decades by the faculty. It gave us all a common experience. I mean, we were anti-traditional in a thoughtful and perhaps forced way. And it was exciting and bizarre and new and different to be going against the conventions. You see, one of the things that was going on, it seems to me, at the good liberal arts colleges at that time was a real conviction that what mattered was what Dewey called the life of the mind. The whole question of the intelligent structure, the understanding of rationality and all of that. You poured yourself into that. You learned to reason as closely as you could and to debate as tightly as possible, that kind of thing.
The law is not a holy thing. I remember when Dan Berrigan broke the law and they interviewed his 80-year-old mother and they said, "Oh, what do you think about your son? What do you think about him breaking the law?" I guess they thought an 80-year-old woman would have 80 years of respect for the law behind her and she'd give them the right answer. And Dan Berrigan's mother said, "It's not God's law." And she had it there. The law is made by very mortal people. They make the law, they tell us what the law is, and then they act as if it's holy writ.
And all it was sitting around in small groups talking about your values and how they applied to politics and to economics.
We were really looking for something.
One of our slogans at the time was that all of the issues are connected.
Now the war in Vietnam has provided the incredibly sharp razor that has finally separated thousands and thousands of people from their illusions about the decency and morality and integrity of this country's purposes internationally. And that is a bitter and saddening insight for people who grew up as we did, believing the things that we did about our country. What kind of a system is it that disenfranchises people in the South, that excludes millions and millions of people from the mainstream and promise of American society, that consistently places material values before human values? What kind of a system is that? We must name that system, and we must change it and control it, else it will destroy us.
I hadn't anticipated the power of, I should have, but I didn't anticipate the power of the reaction to the civilizing effects of the 60s. Previously passive and obedient parts of the population, what are sometimes called the special interests, were beginning to organize and try to enter the political arena. And they said that imposes too much pressure on the state. It can't deal with all these pressures. So therefore they have to return to passivity and become depoliticized. They were particularly concerned with what was happening to young people. The young people are getting too free and independent.
None of us will begin any violence, just as any violence it will be because of the police.
The way they put it, there's a failure on the part of the schools, the universities, and churches, the institutions responsible for the indoctrination of the young. Their phrase, not mine. You want to destroy some system, first defund it. Then it won't work, people will be angry, they want something else. That's a standard technique for privatizing some system. Most of the funding for the colleges comes from tuition, not from the state. That's a radical change. And that's a terrible burden on students. It means that students, if they don't come from very wealthy families, that they're going to leave college with big debts. And if you have a big debt, you're trapped.
Rising defaults on student loans. Many of today's grads owe more than $100,000. We're talking tens of millions of people in trouble.
Well, growing up isn't easy, never has been, but today's young people are faced with challenges unimaginable for generations past. Paying off student debt, buying a house, getting a job. Are all these things becoming out of reach?
Did you know 1/3 of students entering college need a remedial or a developmental course, a class in the basics of reading, math, English, covering material that they should have learned in high school?
Are many young people caught in a trap today where an intense and expensive education guarantees nothing?
Student loan debt has exceeded $1.3 trillion in the United States.
And with tuition for college soaring and prospects for jobs after college plummeting, the situation for students across America looks grim.
I mean, maybe you wanted to become a public interest lawyer, but you're going to have to go into a corporate law firm to pay off those debts. And by the time you're part of the culture, you know, you're not going to get out of it again. And that's true across the board. In the 1950s, it was a much poorer society than it is today, but nevertheless could easily handle essentially free mass higher education. Today, a much richer society claims doesn't have the resources for it.
But of course it's true. I mean, Princeton is just a corporation, like most of these universities. You know, Harvard, the same. They produce systems managers. The largest major at both Harvard and Princeton is computer science. The humanities are withering away. All of those mechanisms that teach us not what to think, but how to think. I mean, they're not wrong that an education is subversive. It's designed to make you ask questions. But the system only wants people who will perpetuate it.
I quoted the Trilateral Commission view of the educational system, namely it's a system of indoctrination of the young. And I think that's correct. It's a system of indoctrination of the young. That was the way the liberal elites regard it, and they're more or less accurate. So the educational system is supposed to train people to be obedient, conformist, not think too much, do what you're told, stay passive, don't cause any crises of democracy, don't raise any questions, and so on. That's basically what the system is about. Even the fact that the system has a lot of stupidity in it, I think, has a function. You know, it means that people are filtered out for obedience. If you can guarantee lots of stupidity in the educational system, you know, like stupid assignments and things like that, you know that the only people who make it through are people like me and like most of you, I guess, who are willing to do it no matter how stupid it is, because we want to go to the next step, you know. So you may know that this assignment is idiotic and the guy up there couldn't think his way out of a paper bag, but you'll do it anyway because that's the way you get to the next class. Well, there are people who don't do that, you know. There are people who say, I'm not going to do it, it's too ridiculous, you know. Those people are called behavioral problems, or something like that. They end up in the principal's office or in the streets or selling drugs or whatever. And all of this is a technique for selection for obedience. And I don't know how to prove this, but I have a feeling that when you go to the elite universities, you find more obedience and conformity, probably because you're getting the students who were better able to do it, you know. Well, all of that is functional. That's the way it works.
Right, the universities are an absolute wreck, you know, right now, because for decades, okay, any graduate student in the humanities who had independent thinking, okay, was driven out. Okay, there was no way to survive.
What can change in the university to bring that back in? Because
rebellion by the grad students. This is what I'm trying to foment. Okay, we absolutely need someone to stand up, okay, and start criticizing authority figures. But no, okay, this generation of young people have been trained throughout middle school and high school and college, okay, to be subservient to authority. There is no question of authority or whatever. They want an expansion of authority. Everything of my generation stood against, and now today's kids have been raised in a helicopter parent, you know, fashion. They feel warm and cozy, okay, by additional expansion of, you know, of authority of these Budinsky, okay, you know, people, I mean, these mediocrities who, like the bureaucrats who infest university. University life has become increasingly unpalatable because of this, thanks to federal regulations, forcing the adding on and adding on and adding on of more layers of bureaucracy. It's a nightmare, an outrage, and none of the faculty have fought back. Now, they pretend to be leftists, okay? No, they're pygmies. I'm telling you, they are passive worms, okay? Not to fight back against the bureaucrats. I would like to cut and sweep out 60% of the electives, the cafeteria menu, which is, I think, a plague, and which has produced these graduates who know absolutely nothing. And I'm really not kidding. They know nothing. I encounter these graduates of the elite schools, okay, in the media, and their minds are utterly unformed and wandering, okay? They know nothing. They know all the current ideology, and that's it.
People who decide that it is important to protest in order to try and right a wrong, in order to fight for justice, are often told you'll never get any. If that had happened in history, no one would have won the right to vote. If that had happened in history, women would still be without the vote. Every single struggle that has been waged has led to enhance the democratic rights of people. And when the powers that be become obstinate, then one has to carry on the struggle. What has happened here in Middlesex is not a total surprise, is it? Given the world we live in, and given the fact that leading politicians of every single mainstream political party, more or less, said that education should be tied into the business world and to profit. And the logic of that is that any department that doesn't produce wealth, or any department in the universities that is not tied into doing something to help industry or business is useless. Cut the salaries of vice chancellors by half. Cut the salaries of deans. Cut the salaries of these groups of management consultants who are hired to tell these guys how you should teach and how many people you should have in the department. Many of these management consultants should be removed forthwith from universities, from the health service, from the BBC, and from all the other public institutions where they give crap advice and are paid huge amounts.
Hear, hear. We must purge our vocabulary. We must clean up our language to say what we mean. A true university serves neither political purpose nor social programs, necessarily partisan and transitory. Above all, it rebukes censorship and correctness of any kind. What we have done through political correctness, the lies we are teaching or having to accept, the questions we are not allowed to ask, not even to ask, no question of answering. Political correctness makes impossible great fields of comparative study. A university should house and it should honor anarchic provocation and the passion of uselessness. What is the most wonderful passion in the world? Uselessness. The notion that the useless is the highest form of human activity.
The corporate state has made a war against critical thinking, and in particular the humanities, because the humanities at their best are about teaching people how to think rather than what to think. They're about teaching people to challenge assumptions and structures. The discipline of the humanities is subversive. It's meant to be subversive. The other thing that the failure to think critically does is it creates a very frightening historical amnesia. So you don't know how you got here. You don't know where you came from. And again, that is something that popular culture, let's call it totalitarian capitalism, seeks to put in place so that people interpret their problems as personal problems rather than political or social problems. When you don't understand what's going on, when you imbibe the illusion that you're fed, the belief that reality is never an impediment to what you desire, that you can have everything you want, that blinds you. It keeps you from seeing what's happening around you. The corporate state knows no limits at this point. It has no regulation, it has no government control, it writes its own laws, it writes its own legislation. So that the rise of popular culture and the obliteration of real culture is part of this entire corporate totalitarian assault on beauty and truth. And that's what they have to seek to eradicate, because those forces are ones that remind us about how we should live and about what it means to be human.
It's important for the youth of a generation to feel that they can change the world, because they really can. The youth of the world are the conscience of the world, and we depend on them to make things change.